It's 11:32, and I would love to welcome you all for this beautiful seminar, webinar. I actually like to call it more of an interaction with a very, very comforting, beautiful voice of Dr. Saumya Sharan. Um, Actually, I'm a big fan of this team, but more so, for different reasons for different folks. And Dr. Saumya is right up there. Um, for me, she personally helps me a lot with a lot of things when she speaks to me. My name is Preetpal Singh. I am based out of the beautiful city of Atlanta. Lots of streets named as Peachtree. It's a wonderful Sunday morning. I have had a few cups of coffee, and now I am here to host Dr. Saumya Sharan. So, Dr. Saumya, welcome to this conversation. Very, very happy to have you here. Um, I know the topic of this discussion is around the the mind piece of diabetes. Um, I personally, I've written about it. I'm very vocal about it that I've struggled with weight, and I think it's very easy to get a nutrition plan or a clinical advice. But I think where the magic gets done is with the mind piece. So Dr. Saumya, very, very interested in listening to your thoughts on the same. Would you take a few seconds and introduce yourself, please?
Sure, and thank you so much. That was very kind of you. It's already given me a boost of motivation. I'm very excited to be here. I'm Dr. Saumya Sharan. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I'm also the behavioral expert with the team, with this wonderful team. And I'd like to believe that what I'm doing here is getting together all of the pieces through that missing piece, which is the piece of the mind, and how to go about things, how to navigate through things with this, and basically work on this puzzle every day. Every day, it's not. I wouldn't say that the puzzle of diabetes management and reversal is a one-time puzzle that you just finish. I think you get to it every day, and sometimes you're not, satisfied, sometimes you're disappointed, sometimes you're frustrated, but you go back right at it. And I think when you're finishing the puzzle, it's the right pieces and the context of fitting it in the puzzle that really matters, and that's where I'm working. And it's wonderful. I really like what I do here, and really looking forward to the webinar or the interaction per se. I'd also like to call it that. And I'd really want all of you to please share whatever it is that you'd like to share, ask questions, or just let us know how you've been navigating through it. Because what we're going to talk about is something that I believe is going to be relatable and something that we all would understand at least at some level. So yes, that's about me.
Yeah. And Dr. Soumya, just like any quintessential professional, I'm sure you're pretty modest about your accomplishments in terms of your professional education and such. You do hold a PhD in clinical psychology. Um I have seen you do wonders with children, folks who are much older in age, and now with your focus on the behavioral aspect or behavioral psychological aspect of diabetes. So it's a very interesting field. I think you're also very accomplished in the sense that you have been a recipient of Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam Award for Health. And I know you're pretty modest. That's why I'm just introducing you. And I think you have a very differentiated view from, I like to call it the industry, about how this is, right? So I think my monologue, and we'll go to the next slide in a few seconds, right? Is pretty simple. I get everything about diabetes. I understand the leptins, the ghrelins, the uh, dopamines, the insulins. I understand the hormones. I understand what my nutritionist wants to get done with me, the limit the carbs, eat more protein, do more fat. I also understand when I go into my physician's office, I get very healthy doses of advices and all that, right?
Yeah.
But I still can't get it done, right? So I believe you will help us in unlocking that I cannot get it done in this particular seminar. Is that what you're going to do?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm really striving to do today, and I hope it's resourceful, it's helpful, it's impactful,
Yeah.
and most of all, it's relatable to people. So
Yeah, and just like Dr. Saumya said, let's make this a lot more interactive. We have the message window. This is not a monologue. I'd rather like to have discussions than actually present a bunch of PowerPoint slides and off we go to our home. Because ultimately, just like Dr. Saumya said, it has to be relatable. And relatable means it has to come out of your context and whatnot. Just a few house rules, just let's go through this and so that make sure that we're all on the same page. Number one is want this seminar, webinar to be really interactive. Please fire away your questions, post it there. I will moderate those questions. I will ask off of Dr. Saumya. Only reason is it helps, make sure that the conversation is directionally correct. And, I'm able to handle redundancy in questions, if any, or maybe combine a few questions which I feel are compelling enough to be asked together. So please interact during the whole discussion. We'll have lots of polls. I would request you all to respond to the polls. There are two ways to respond to the polls. The first way is you can put your response on the message window. I presume if you're on a laptop, if you look at the bottom right hand corner, it's the it's the uh, it's the third icon from bottom right corner. Or you could actually go to, if again you're on the laptop, you have it as a second icon from bottom right hand corner. You can go in there. There is something called activities. That's what it's called. And then there is polls. So you will see that. If you are on a mobile phone, it sort of works the same way. I think if you click on the three dots, if you click on them, these two icons pop up. So that's the first thing. Second thing, please, 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 we want to be absolutely, absolutely sure that we are not giving you any clinical advice here. We are not talking about type 1 diabetes. We are not talking about LADA, or we are not talking about gestational diabetes. Please consider this session as informational only. While there is a lot of good scientific, clinical, expert-based commentary on this particular session, but the practice of medicine was always with a context. You have a unique context, you have a unique situation. So therefore, please do not take this advice and start applying it without really consulting your physician or doctor or even us, right? So I know after this session is done, feel free to reach out to our teams and we'll help you contextualize the answers which we have here. So with that, I want to go to the next slide. And Dr. Saumya, again, can you please reiterate what are we trying to cover as topics here? And then I request everybody to engage in this conversation around these topics.
right. So the topic for today's interaction is making diabetes care and reversal easy. I think one of the narratives that we start with when it comes to as soon as we get the diagnosis of diabetes, the first thing that hits us is it's complicated, it's hard, it's life changing, it's going to bring about a lot of elements in my life which I'm not okay with or which I'm going to resist. So what we're really going to talk about here are some very actionable, doable tools in terms of and strategies, of course, but really to understand how the mind works, how our thoughts impact our feelings, and feelings impact our behaviors. And that's why the choices that we make and why we make certain choices. and to really gain a sense of agency and control over the choices we make. I think it's when I feel it's fairly simple in terms of physical fitness, that we see that how the body works. When we know how the body works, that I need to probably go to the gym or I need to work out, and this is how it's going to help me. I need to sleep a certain number of hours every night. I have to have a certain kind of food. And we know this because we know how the body works. But a lot of the times I feel we're not very aware of how the mind works, or how our thoughts or our internal conversations that happened in our mind, or what we feel about things, and why we go towards that that ice cream and not towards something else, and what is that play behind it. Once we're able to really understand how the mind is working, how behavioral aspects or our thoughts are working, it's going to become very doable and manageable, because you'll know that this is my pattern, this is what pattern I choose every time. And now that I'm aware, I have more power over breaking that pattern and going towards incremental improvement, and going towards a journey where I feel I have a sense of agency towards what I do with my physical activity, what I do with my diabetes care, what I do with my management of diabetes, and how to integrate that into your everyday life. So that's essentially what we're going to talk about today. Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. And I think, that's very important, right? I think for me personally, if as I relate to these topics, right, I notice something about myself, which is I always want to understand why I do certain things and why I do not like to do certain things, right? So is that what you are also going to be talking about in this whole thing? And then how do you move those items which I do not like to do over to the from that bucket to the doing bucket without really making it a challenge? Is that generally the notion behind this particular discussion?
Yes. Yes.
I think must be a lag there she has, right? So I'll come back to that question, once she's back, right? In the
I'm
meanwhile,
sorry.
can we, sorry, that's fine. We just had heard a little bit of a lag. So Dr. Soumya, can you go at it again?
Yeah, so essentially, this is what we are going to cover, because I feel you cannot really control or really transform or bring about change or improvement in something that you cannot make sense of. So, if you're able to really understand that this is how it works, this is why I am not able to do, I know that this is important for me. We all know that we need to sleep 8 hours. We all know that you need to get up early in the morning and go for something that is very healthy, go for a meditative practice, but we don't do it. What is behind that not doing it is something that I'm going to cover, and really building little aspects of it, and through very actionable and doable strategies is something that I'm going to be covering today.
Fantastic. So fantastic, Dr. Soumya. So let's, with that, with that thought, let's, can we go to the next slide? Let's start with engaging the audience and see what these folks think about, right? So the question is, what percentage of diabetics suffer from psychological or emotional disorders? Now, I want to be absolutely clear. The way the question is framed is not to put you into a diagnosis of, hey, you have a psychological condition. That's not what we're trying to say here. The question is basically, do we even understand that while we are diabetic, as an average everyday human being who is stable, what other factors kind of play into the diabetics mix, right? So from a psychological or emotional perspective, are there any disorders associated with diabetic patients? So you think 25% of folks have some kind of a disorder associated with diabetics, right? I mean, just to be more vocal about myself, for example, I know I'm pre-border diabetic. Just speaking about for myself, I notice that disorders come in bouts where I happen to have a lot of unusual amount of stress pertaining to my work and my life of work, and that basically throws everything into a dizzy. So I would be one of these guys potentially this question is asking about. So I have we gotten enough answers on this particular
Yeah.
question?
Yeah, so we have got around 75% who have voted for 41 percentage, and 25% for 72 percentage. So, and there are very few responses for 25% as well. So, yeah.
So yeah.
Yes, so I was saying that like 75% of them have voted for 41%, and 25% have voted for 72%. And there are only like few votes for 25%, like very few.
So I think the consensus is, I think with diabetes, there's something else, right? Which is also part of the package. So most of them agree 41%, or almost half of the population actually suffers from some other um, things. And then it's interesting to see 72% suffer from something. I don't like these words suffer, but just for this context of this conversation, I'm using it. Um, so any comments on that, Dr. Saumya?
I think it's very interesting to see, how the how everyone's been responding to this, and it's very interesting. I'd really like to understand, in fact, if one of you can just tell us what made you go in for a 41%, or what made you go in for a 72%. Just something about what is it, what's your headspace like, what's your thought process like when you're choosing a certain number. So I really want to understand if anyone's willing to kind of share with us, and then I'd like to probably go around that.
Yeah, if anybody wants to unmute themselves, perhaps somebody used the option number 3, 25%. We're very, very interesting to understand what it is, right? Because I know Dr. Saumya and myself have those offline conversations, and we exchange a lot of these notes, right? So would love to really understand number 3, because there might be something which we are investigating there.
I don't have a lot of professional advice because I'm not a doctor. This is Meghna Naik. Good morning and good afternoon. But I have always believed for the last about, I think after I became a mom, that cortisol, stress hormone, directly affects how healthy we are. That is not just for diabetes, but that is my general observation with my own body. Again, it's not professional, so don't take my advice. But the happier and stress free you are, or stress management techniques you are equipped with as a human being, decides your health. And I do feel that psychological and emotional disorders, if untreated, if ignored, or as in the Indian community, denied as even existing, that leads to stress. Denial of a disease or emotional disorder is stress by itself, away from actually treating the emotional disorder, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a fantastic response. And anybody else? Okay, I think that's a little bit of a silence
The
there.
way, yeah, that's fine. The way I was thinking about it is, or the way I think about it is, a lot of what we deal with at a physiological level or at the level of the body, you cannot deal with it until you have the right emotional and psychological tools, right? And the fact that um, I struggle with either my weight or diabetic control means that I probably haven't learned what some of those coping mechanisms are, right? And that's why I don't necessarily like the word disorders, but I think of them as challenges, right? And all of us go through those challenges on our journey. Um, and I can't imagine not facing those challenges and diabetes being purely a physical manifestation. I just can't put those two together. So my actually initial reaction was to go with 72%, but then sort of toned it down to 41%.
No, thank you for that.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Dr. Karamveer Goyal. I'm a practicing physician and diabetologist for 40 years. I relate this thing to two aspects. One is the associated disorders person who is a diabetic, associated disorders of psychology or psychiatric disorders one is suffering from, like anxiety, depression, and other things. And the other aspect is the false beliefs the person has while combating the diabetic problem with himself or herself, like my sugar is 200 is normal for me, or my sugar will never come down even with the treatment. Or certain levels of blood sugar told by my doctor are not real. They are pharmacologically, motivated like that. So I relate to these two. So overall, in my practice, I find 40 to 50% of patients have such type of problems. Two aspects. Thank you very much.
Very, very interesting, Dr. Goyal. So this is a summary of practicing for about 35 years, seeing thousands of patients, right, Dr. Goyal?
Yeah, absolutely. That's my, summary of my, experience of 40 years, 35 years, 40 years, right?
If I may add to, the thoughts which were, discussed on this particular forum, my own personal thing has been, I'm an engineer by trade. I think my upbringing was, these questions have a lot of context. That's why I'm giving that context. My upbringing was in an environment where it was super competitive. A lot of college professional insecurities would play. We come from a very middle class background, and you're always afraid of the uncertainty which may manifest if you don't work hard on your education, etc., etc. So given that, I think I'll call it the pre Dr. Saumya phase and post Dr. Saumya phase. Pre Dr. Saumya phase, if you were to speak with me, I would not even understand these phenomenons, or would categorically say, nope, I don't have any psychological or emotional disorders as it relates to how I gain weight or how I become diabetic or pre-diabetic. That's the pre-phase, because being in an environment which is always stressful from an education perspective, or meeting your life goal perspective, or chasing the next professional target perspective, we were always competitive. We were always under some form of stress, psychological stress, which made us go. So you would absolutely, if somebody says, do you need help, or do you have issues with coping with all of these phenomenons, without even like 15 seconds after, like not even 15, in 5 seconds, somebody more like me would respond, no issues, right? I think I'm just doing fine. But in fact, a lot of us actually struggle with actually even recognizing that we have some kind of psychological or emotional thing, because we've been doing that for us thus far. The post Dr. Saumya, I've had the pleasure of interacting with her. The post actually helped me recognize a little bit better, like the causal science, and that's what Dr. Saumya is going to talk about. So yes, if you ask me, before I met some wonderful working professionals, my answer would be 3, maybe 4 actually. And now it is, I would almost vote for 1, right? Which is all of us as human beings, find it difficult to recognize some of the phenomena happening in our life, and then even if we recognize them, we subconsciously don't accept it, right? So that's my reaction to a question like that. So I guess, is that, Dr. Samya, is that what you were kind of looking for in the responses?
Yes, that's one of the reasons that I asked people, what made you go for 72% or what made you go for 41% or 25%? Because ultimately it's really about getting down to the understanding of how these are interrelated, how the aspects of the physiological aspects and the psychological aspects and the emotional aspects are very interrelated, to the point that one is incomplete without the other. Even if you look at research, now research is something, when you look at research aspects, you kind of look at it, you read it, and you're able to accept it at a very intellectual level, that okay, these are facts and this is what it tells me, that when I have my diagnosis of diabetes right in front of me, it comes as a root shock sometimes, or it comes as anger sometimes, it comes as guilt sometimes, or it comes as denial sometimes, that this can't happen to me. It used to happen to other people that I've heard about. Now, this is the diagnosis that which really brings me to the next slide, or next aspect that we're going to talk about, which is the acceptance of diabetes at a very emotional level. So you get your diagnosis and you go through the different emotions. Now, we don't understand that the diagnosis of diabetes is not just about, you will now be going for some doctor visits, or you will now be going for specialized consultations or specialized tests, or you'll have to be watching your diet. It also means that the emotions that you're going through at this point, and if you're not able to emotionally accept the diagnosis of diabetes, in terms of really sitting down and asking yourself, what does this mean to me at a very core emotional level? How is this going to change my life from now on? How is my life going to look like now when I go out for parties with my friends? Or how is it going to change that aspect of me when I go to the fridge and I'm not mindful about it, about my choices, and I pick up the next sweet thing that I see. Because then when you're able to really reflect and introspect on these questions and do it with yourself more than you're doing it with other people, you really understand that there is a level of acceptance that you need to reach to be able to see that yes, life is going to be different, but we always associate different with kind of negative or adverse. But how do I really work in terms of making this difference work out for me? The other thing is, when you go through these emotions, it's normal to go through any kind of emotions. But if you're not able to work on these emotions, or if you're not really reflecting or acknowledging these emotions, it's really going to impact the way you manage your diabetes. It's going to impact your adherence levels. If you're angry and you're in denial, you'll be like, why should I go for doctor visits so regularly? I don't think I need it. Or if you are going through guilt, maybe you are not going to upload your food logs, because you'll be like, maybe I will be judged for what I'm eating, so I might not do it. That'll impact your diabetes, of course, your levels and your care and management of it. If you're going through anger, if you're going through the irritation of it, or if you're just, sometimes we react to anger with rebellion, that I'm still going to do whatever I want. I'm still going to probably take my medicines if I feel like, or put up the logs if I feel like, and then see what happens. It will impact your quality of life. It will impact your diabetes management, the care, and really overall how you're able to navigate through this journey with diabetes being there on the journey. So it's a very, very strong interconnected relationship, to the point, like I said, one is incomplete without the other. You need to understand what it means to me at a level where this is the knowledge given to me. Okay, you have diabetes and this is what you need to do from now on. But emotionally, how do I feel about this? Because how I feel about this is really going to impact tomorrow morning when I wake up to trick myself and give my sugar logs and track my sugar logs. So that is why we need to understand how closely related and how strongly related the emotional and thought aspect is to diabetes management and care.
So, Dr. Saumya, I think you so forgive me. You gave us a lot there, right? I mean, I think, for a matter of fact, I think a lot of this has to be unboxed and truly understood, right? So help me understand this, right? So just like what Dr. Goyal previously said, I am sitting in my hand with a blood report. It says it has some readings on it. HbA1c is sitting at 9, fasting glucose at some level, and a very well qualified physician tells me this is diabetes. Are you saying, question number one, are you saying that although I see the numbers, I don't accept it? Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is acceptance, if it is not happening at the level where you feel from within. Of course, the doctor is telling you what to do, the physician is telling you what to do. But how do you feel about those recommendations? How willing are you to understand that that's going to be uncomfortable? That's really going to be complicated. That's really going to change a lot of, or that's really going to bring about a lot of transformations or transitions in my life. And you're still willing to go ahead with it. To understand that, yes, these things are important and I need to do it, even though they're uncomfortable, even though it doesn't feel good right now, or even though I feel like it's not in my control. But am I willing to take that first step towards bringing those changes? So I think, to answer your question, when you get that report and you see that, okay, I have diabetes, and the physician, like a very renowned physician, tells you that, these are the things, we're really looking at a very medical management of things, uh, but or a bio management of things. But what about the psychosocial management of things? What about really feeling that, okay, my life from this point onwards is not going to look the same? But does that mean I lose that sense of agency over my life? Does that mean I lose that sense of power and control over my life? What do I do with these emotions? Is it really in my hands to work through them? But and to really understand that, yes, if you can regulate and work on the emotions that come associated with the acceptance at an emotional level, that's when you're willing from inside to take the next step forward. And it's not so much about the world telling you. Of course, there's so much info. It's an information overload. Everywhere we get information, but what does that information mean to you at an individual level?
Right. So I mean, from that comment of yours, right? So if I must summarize, right? So if I may summarize, right? So the first comment which I have, or observation I have, is you're saying acceptance is not equal to acceptance. Acceptance is equal to acceptance plus the domino effect of that acceptance, which may require change, right? So that's what you mean by acceptance, right? The willingness to do something, right? But as soon as you say that to me, and I'm a prototypical, call me a patient. Again, patient is a very negative word. And I refer to you like, all the ancient scriptures across the world, all the civilizations. I fully understand. It's in fact inscribed on Temple of Apollo in Greece as well. It says something like "Know thyself and nothing more." Right? So it's inscribed over there that know thyself and nothing more. So if you are defining the way you're defining things, you're bringing two thoughts to my mind. The first thought you bring to my mind is, okay, what has my creator or my environment or my society or whatever I have done to myself designed me as? Something we like to call as personality, right? What am I actually made up of at a psychological level, at a mind level? That's going to define how I handle the domino effect of a empirical evidence being presented to me. That's point one. So I want you to comment on that. I think you're alluding to that. Like these responses, the shock, denial, anger, guilt, anxiety, are primarily going to be triggered from how do I operate currently in my, you use the word socio, at a societal level, how do I interact with my ecosystem? But more importantly, this is the second point I want you to, I mean, I'm asking a very, I'm kind of unbundling this whole thing with you here. So I'm bringing all the aspects to this particular question of yours. The second thing I want to understand from you is, look, I'm a prototypical, call it patient, and these words do not resonate with me. Number one is change. Second is discipline. Third is diet. Fourth is control. Fifth is willpower. And the sixth is motivation. I'm not in that zone that where somebody, a renowned, well-respected physician says, oh, from tomorrow onward, stop eating your favorite cookies, or from tomorrow onwards, you're not going to get hold of your the the rice delicacies which probably your mom made for you and you grew up on that. I'm not going to do that because these are the words which I just talked about. So are you saying that, are you asking me to change? Are you asking me to recognize something from the time that empirical evidence is presented? So I got two
Well,
questions. One is, the first part of my question was, how does my personality, which is a net summation of how I have developed so far, and also at this moment, what am I dealing with in my life? Whether it's a profession, whether it's a relationship with my wife or my kids or whatever, that's called personality. I'm summarizing that as that. And the second question I'm asking is, you gave me a thing, and you said you use the word change, and that change is the word I hate the most.
Hmm.
So are you talking about the domino effect of handling these two things?
Well, essentially, yes. But I want to understand. So right now, I want to understand that, to answer your first question, that when we're dealing with the domino effect of it and bringing the personality aspect of it, it's really making it more personalizing and more relatable to yourself. It's not a generalized concept of change that I'm talking about. So I'd probably combine both questions and combine the, answer for both questions together. The narrative around change, that it's a negative word for me as well, because the narrative around change, and the first thing the mind and body does to change is it resists, it reacts, because that's how we've evolved. It means something's off the balance. Now, that's the very generalized concept of change. But how do you really bring in that concept to understand that with the kind of person that I am, in terms of my patterns, in terms of my thoughts, how my thoughts, the awareness around, really the key word being awareness here, awareness and mindfulness around my thoughts, how they have been formed because of course, certain experiences that I've gone, and we all have gone. It's very individual, in terms of almost like a fingerprint. It's that individual. We all go through experiences and we form certain, belief systems, or in very simple terms, certain rules for living, ways to see the world. And that impacts the way we think. That thinking impacts the way we feel, and the feeling impacts the way we behave or make certain choices. So I'll give you an example. And a lot of the times we go through life not being aware that there is so much of control and agency that you can bring into this process. So, for example, I meet people who say that, what, I get stressed and there's nothing I can do. I go and just have that ice cream. So they are having this notion that it's the situation, that is making them eat that ice cream. Now, what happens here is when you say that, oh, well, it's always stress that makes me eat like that, that makes me go for that ice cream. You're not understanding that it is not the situation, because then the control goes off to something external. You don't feel empowered. It's not the situation. It is the thought that you have about the situation. So, in this, whenever I'm feeling stressed, what do I say to myself in my mind? I say to myself, well, I deserve to feel better, so I deserve that ice cream. And that's what I'm doing every time. But I'm not understanding that it is a thought error, which is called a self sabotaging thought. And every time I'm responding to self sabotaging thought with a self sabotaging action. And every time I'm going in for that ice cream. But once I become aware that, okay, this is the thought that really comes in, this is how I feel. I feel so miserable in that moment that I want to do something and have that ice cream. I feel like I have to do this every time and it's a pattern I can't break. But once you become aware, you really understand that, okay, it's the same thought having that I'm having in this moment, that I'm feeling stressed, I'm feeling miserable, I deserve to feel better. But how do you add to that? I also deserve to work on my mind and body, the goals that I have for myself. And that's also taking care of myself. That's also really feeling better about myself. So now that I'm aware of the pattern, do I still go for it? Do I still go stay on autopilot and do nothing about it? Or do I really make a different choice right here, right now, and probably not go for that ice cream? Because I have other ways to manage stress. I have other coping tools to manage stress. And it's not just that ice cream, it's just that I've not experienced it yet. I need to train myself to bring in those tools in my life. That's when things start to shift.
Very, very interesting. I think with that one comment, you probably explained. I mean, this is beyond the scope of this particular discussion. I'm sure we'll be on this discussion for a while if we continue doing this. But I think I observed something based on that discussion with you, right? The two times I actually perform gluttony are as follows. Number one, if somebody is visiting us, so a guest, and I use that just like you have the stress is equal to ice cream. My thing is a guest is equal to party mode, right? That's my first this thing. And the second I actually do a lot is, oh, I'm on the road, I'm visiting a new city, I really need to try out their cuisines, right? So that's yes, it's a self-sabotaging thought. Trust me, I burn 2000 calories just in fitness, exercises, everything. But this is my moment of self sabotaging thought. I think we're 45 minutes into the into the discussion. This was very, very interesting. I appreciate this particular segment of the conversation, and hopefully we'll unbundle this even more. How does a individual self sabotage themselves, and what is it we can do to actually not self sabotage ourselves, right? So let's move on from a conversation perspective. So you defined the problem very well. I think you talked about it. Now, could you talk about some of the techniques by which I can keep myself on a track?
Sure. So moving on, one of the things that I love to use this term, it's called creating control pockets, and it really what it means is getting back in charge. Now, the first thing that happens to you when you receive a diagnosis that you were not expecting, or when things start to kind of turn out which you had not expected, or there's a change of sorts, what happens is the first thing, the first element you tend to lose is the element of control, the element of power. You tend to go down a spiral of powerlessness, helplessness. It almost feels like nothing's in my control. I don't know what's happening. I didn't expect this. I didn't expect that I'm going to be given a diagnosis of diabetes at the age of, say, 46. My plans were completely different. But now that I have it, I don't know what to do about it. It's just thrown me off balance. So what happens is we lose that element of control. Now, how do you get back in charge? How do you re-establish control? The way to do it is to create small pockets, or really essentially small doses of control. How does that look like? Small doses of control are really what you do is think of one thing that you'd like to start working upon, which will give you a sense of empowerment. And I'm going to give you an example here. And try to start working on it. Take small steps, one step at a time, and then small doses of it. And try to, let's say, do it at the same time every day, no matter what. So I'll give you an example. And we have the example, the next slide also. So, for example, that what happens is that sometimes I feel like so I'll give you an example of someone I met during COVID, and they said that it's just so uncertain. It's just everything's so out of hands. I don't know what's going to happen the next day, and that's something that very similar happens in diabetes also. You feel like I really don't know what's happening here. So what do you do? How do you get back that sense of control? So with this person, what I did was I asked her that, what is that one thing that you'd like to gain your power back in, or gain a sense of control back in? And this person said that, there's always so many people in the house. It's lockdown, of course, everyone's together, cooped in together, and there's just so much noise that their children, their grandchildren, their parents, and I just feel like I used to have those quiet moments, and those moments were it was almost like my power boosters, and I don't get that anymore. And when I don't get that, I feel like I'm just starting the day wrong. It's not in my control. And what we finally did was that we started to create small bits of 5 minutes duration of her really taking some time in the morning or sometime in the evening, where she would talk to everyone and say that, what, I'm going to work on something and I need your help with this. So the element of support is very important here. She told people that I need those 5 minutes in the morning, or I need these 5 minutes in the evening. Mostly it was morning, and she started to also get up a little early. And those 5 minutes, she just started to spend with herself in the quiet of things. Now, what started to happen eventually was that those 5 minutes, of course, became 7, 10, and then finally it was half an hour. She started to feel more empowered. She started to feel that, okay, now things are getting back on track, or now I'm feeling more in charge. And that led her to take more actions on other aspects of her life. So, similarly, if we were to relate it to this, really understanding what is that one thing that you probably do every day. Choose that one thing, make it one step at a time. Don't go for 5 things. Choose that one thing and try to do it at the same time every day. It can be something very simple, that you're going to have this particular breakfast at 9 a.m. every morning, or 10 a.m. every morning, no matter what. Now, everything else is out of your control, but it's this thing that is in your control. And when you start to establish that small dose of control, you start to get back an element of power. You start to feel empowered. And that feeling of empowered makes you understand that if this is something that I can work upon, I might as well apply this to other aspects of my life. So that's one of the strategies that I wanted to talk about, that establishing small pockets of power and getting back in charge.
So Dr. Saumya, very, very interesting. So you're saying, a lot of us are we live our life very reactively, right? We just presented something by the environment, we respond to it, and we keep doing this. And I think somewhere that creates that feeling of helplessness. Seemingly a totally uncorrelatable phenomenon of just waking up in the morning and taking the time to make your cup of tea, and come what may, I might lose $1 million deal, my kids might explode, my car may run off of the driveway. It doesn't matter to me. I'm going to just make that cup of tea for those 5 minutes with with proper focus and attention on here's sugar, here's oh no, we don't we don't promote sugar, but let's say let's say I'm a Japanese samurai, I'm making my green tea, right? So here's the matcha tea, I'll grind the powder, I'll warm up the water, I'll put the powder in it. You're saying that that simple activity can bring you control as to how the rest of the day goes?
If you are consistent with it and you're doing it every day at that particular time, the message that goes to the brain is that, okay, no matter what happens, this is going to happen tomorrow morning. Next morning, no matter what's happening, this is again going to happen tomorrow morning. So the brain actually starts to establish pockets of safety, predictability, its its familiarity, and hence its control. And that's really very effective. It's a lot of the times it's always the smaller things, but it's really very effective because once you get that boost of empowerment, you're going to use that in other aspects of your life. We've all heard Viktor Frankl saying that if you want to really change your life, start by making your bed. Because what happens is when you start and you feel like, I want to become something big, and you're saying, I need to just start making my bed. How is that going to be useful? Well, because when you start doing that, it gives you small boosts of reinforcement. I did something right, and I did something that was in my control. That was difficult. I didn't do it earlier. That was difficult, but I was able to achieve it. And I'm achieving it tomorrow, and I'm doing it every day. This feels more in control. So the reinforcement that you get and the element of control and power that you get with that helps you to really push it into other domains of your life.
Okay, so I mean, there's a big fad here in US called the me time, and I think a lot of the me time originates from wives trying to get a little bit away from the families, say, yeah, I need this time for myself, or a hardworking professional, they create these me times in their 9 to 6 or 9 to 7 routines. So it's very interesting. You're saying create that me time, do that 1% thing, and seemingly you'll start seeing the feeling of helplessness start dissipating a little bit, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. So that's a great suggestion about me time. Like, I was always very condescending about what is this me time phenomenon, right? You should be out there. But it seems like me time actually works, right? So what are we talking next, Dr. Saumya? What are we discussing? Yeah.
Okay. So two strategies that I'm going to go delve right into. One is what I call that you cannot control what you cannot make sense of. So essentially, where this comes from and where it originates from is that when you're able to acknowledge, understand, recognize, see a pattern to something, and really identify to yourself, and probably even say to yourself that this is what is happening and this is how I'm feeling. So what happens is that when you do all of this, the problem, so I'm going to the scientific part of it, the problem solving part of the brain becomes activated. So when you're really naming, recognizing, giving a pattern to it, structure, making a structure out of it, tracking it, then what happens is the problem solving part of your brain gets activated, which means that you're, instead of feeling lost and instead of really feeling I don't know what to do with this, you're able to understand, okay, this is what I see in terms of a pattern. Maybe this is how I'd like to go about it. So at least there is the next step that becomes a little more visible to you. So what I'm really talking about is the importance of creating a structure, the importance of really tracking things, the importance of keeping an account of what is happening with you. That's why we say that, give us your food logs. We want to, it's not that we just want to see what you're eating. We and you, like a team, you and I, we sit together and we see if there is a pattern to it. we see if this is making sense in terms of a structure. Is it that on the days where I've had a very difficult day at work, or a day where I've probably had a conflict, and I'm talking about emotional aspects, or a day where I just went out and was not mindful about eating, I notice the spikes. I notice how it impacts my body. So you're really able to see it in almost like real time, that I'm identifying that there is a pattern to it. My choices really lead to certain consequences. And I have more control. Hence, I have more control over those choices, because if you want different consequences, then the different choices part starts with you. So you cannot make sense of what you cannot track, essentially, or what you cannot organize in terms of a structure. That's one. And the next one that I want to talk about is understanding the cognitive functioning. So very heavy words here, um, cognitive functioning, and but essentially what it boils down to is remember the ice cream example that I was talking about. That a lot of times in our life, what happens is that, sorry, you want to say something?
No, no, go ahead, please.
Okay. A lot of times in our life, we feel like, situations made me do this, or the circumstances made me do this, or I was with a group of people and there was intense pressure that made me do this, or I live in an environment where this is preferred and I don't want to be left out. So that made me make a choice. So what we're doing is we're taking that locus of control out of ourselves, and we're not even realizing that we're giving it to other people who probably have no control over us, or we're giving it to circumstances. So for example, I'll give that probably that ice cream example again. What happens is, but now in terms of a different thought pattern, what happens is a lot of the times you feel stressed, you go for the fridge, you take out that ice cream. Here is a self, the thought is that I'm feeling stressed, I feel miserable, I deserve to feel better, so I'll go and take that ice cream. But what you're doing is you're taking an action which is sabotaging your health goals a lot more, right? So that's how you're responding, and you're not understanding the self-sabotaging thought error that you're going through because you're not aware. Another thought pattern that we generally go through is all or none thinking, which is basically it's just black and white. Either you take that one, if I've taken that one bite, my day is gone. I'm just going to eat whatever I like for the rest of the day, because it doesn't matter. But that's what, even if you're responding with, well, I've taken one bite of ice cream, now might as well just go out and have other things as well, because you feel it's either this side or that side. But you don't understand that, it's almost like you're driving and you miss the turn. You don't say to yourself that, oh, I'm going to keep driving 10 more miles ahead. Or you don't say to yourself that, you know what, let it be, let me just go wherever the car is taking me. You stop and you feel like, okay, where is the next U-turn? I'm going to take that U-turn and I'm going to come back. Similarly, if you're really responding to that all or none thinking by telling yourself that, well, yes, I kind of, it was a difficult moment and I messed up and I took that bite of ice cream, or I took that ice cream. But if I'm able to really watch what I eat after this, I'm probably going to go to bed feeling super proud of my achievement, that I was able to get back on track, that I was able to really be mindful and bounce back. I was resilient. So that's essentially what I talk about in terms of cognitive functioning, which is that it's very important to understand and be aware of the fact that how we think about a situation and how we feel about it will always impact the choices that you make. It's not the situation that's making you do it, it's how you think about it that is making you do it. So that's essentially the cognitive triad, or the cognitive triangle, that I like to call. That once you're able to become aware of it, you're able to understand thought errors and you're able to respond to them differently. So these were some of the other strategies and tools and techniques basically to cope with management and care and making it easier and more manageable.
So, guys, real apologize. We are 2 minutes over, and I think I am going to, apply my best judgment and say, well, we have a little bit more things to cover. So I really apologize. We'll continue for another 10 minutes so that we can cover all of this. I think there's so many things to unpack, unbundle here. I think, it's not enough time for Dr. Saumya to explain. I do want to say that, what we are discussing here are a little bit of a higher level strategies, but Dr. Saumya obviously works with us almost on a daily basis, actually going through these on a daily basis with members, patients, and helping them see that, realize in their real world situation. So I can perfectly understand that a lot of us may actually find this hard to correlate because it's the first time these concepts are getting introduced and they're very high level at this point of time. But I seriously encourage you guys to ask questions and then also have follow-up meetings on this very topic with Dr. Saumya. We'll make that happen. So just we're going to use 7 more minutes. We're going to try to not rush through the whole content, but bring it to a logical, conclusive place. But just to summarize what you said previously, right? And I can see some of those correlations in my life itself, right? Every morning, I make an effort to, once I go to the bathroom, immediately once I come out of bathroom, I get onto a weighing scale and record that weight. And I think, Dr. Saumya, that's the power of data. That's the power of that act of putting an observation into a database actually triggers a chain of thoughts in me as to what I did the previous day to impact that value. And then I start doing a causal analysis and cost benefit analysis of what happened previously so that I can remain on track for this thing. I do have one problem in that whole thing is, say, for example, sleep, right? So some days I'm sleeping 5 hours, some days I'm sleeping 7 hours. I'm unable to understand those patterns, right? So the understanding of, so you talked a lot about identifying patterns, but I'm saying even when I'm looking for patterns, I'm unable to find those patterns. So that's where you're saying also is that work with somebody who's a professional like yourself, discuss these scenarios with them and ask them questions, voluntarily pose these questions, and then that person can help you understand these patterns. And then of course you're recording data, so once you start seeing patterns, then you can actually resolve those patterns, right? Is that the summary of the previous question? And the last thing you said was perfection is an enemy, right? I mean, I think you should always look for, even if you get off the train and the train has moved out of the platform, don't think that, hey, the train is gone, then I'm going to go to the market, do whatever I want to do, and then come back the next day and catch the next train. You still have an opportunity to get back onto the train. Don't let perfection destroy, all or nothing perfection destroy your gains or your potential to actually rejuvenate yourself, correct? I mean, that was the summary of that segment.
Absolutely. Yes, right on point, or both of them. We need to strive for good enough and not perfection. And we need to understand, I think it's a lot of awareness of how things work, how our mind works, how the patterns work, which really give you an insight into, like you said, that tracking, observing, really giving an insight into this is the cause of what must have happened, or this is what I did to make this probably happen, or I wasn't even aware of it, but now that I am, do I still want to go down that path, or do I want to just respond differently today?
Okay, awesome. So in that continuation of that series, what tools are there to actually get better at diabetes? And again, I'm finding it exciting that none of this conversation we use the word nutrition plan, or you gotta eat ragi dosa, or you gotta stop eating carbs, or keto diet, or this diet. So this is wonderful. We're just talking about how the mind plays its own thing, and the mind is the ultimate thing, right? So I'm enjoying this conversation. So what are we talking next? What is the next tool you're talking about?
The next tool that we're really talking about, so one is, of course, support circle. The reason why I use the term in the beginning, which was biopsychosocial, we need to understand there is, of course, the medical element of it, where you of course go to the doctors and you get consultations and you follow their advice. There is the mind aspect at the social psycho biopsycho, and then the social aspect, because we're essentially, of course, we're social beings. We will get impacted by the choices that other people make around us. We will need that support when we are going through a difficult time, understanding that what is this, how is this going to impact my life from now on. Or we would need the support, whether it is your family, whether it is a friend, whether it is your person, anyone, a loved one that you can trust, who you can loop in as part of your journey. Let's say sometimes to just be accountable, that what, I'm going to track my data every day, I'm going to track my sugar readings every day, and I want you to be part of this journey, because I need to, one, know that there is someone with me, and second is I will also know that I am accountable to this someone, because when we talk about this, at some point, yes, I would want to be in a space where I can explain why was this reading here and not here on that particular day, and I would really need that support. So I think just understand, you need that support system at this, in this journey. Whether, as I said, it can be anyone, but you need to reach out to people. Whether it is a community who's going through something very similar, and it just creates such a strong impact. And according to a lot of research studies, the group impact of conversations which you find relatable and you find empathetic can have so much of a healing effect on you that we don't even realize that. A lot of times we go through something very adverse in our life, and you just feel like, I want people to listen to me. I want to tell a story about this. I want to write a book about this. Why do you want to do all of those things? Because essentially, you want to connect with people at a deeper level. You want that collective space to be formed. And that space has very transformative effects. So, what I'm really saying here is, in very simple terms, that establish your pillars of support. Get them, loop them into your process when you're tracking something, when you're part of a plan, when you're part of a program, a structure, a journey. Get them to be part of this. Have conversations with them. Tell them about how difficult it is for you, or how easy it is for you, or how you're able to manage it. Let them know that this is what I'm doing, and I need you to be there and create that space for me. Sometimes not to give me advice, sometimes not to tell me anything, but just to show up for me, so that I know that I'm doing this and there's someone who's showing up for me. So create that support circle. And finally, if I were to go to the last one, which is what I call adopt the hacks, which I really want to explain in terms of really understand there are some things that work for us in very beautiful ways, or in very interesting ways. One of the things that I want to talk about here is the PREMAC principle. PREMAC principle essentially says is that if you are struggling with a low probability behavior, for example, I just can't track my blood sugar level in the morning when I'm fasting or post my meal. I just forget it, or I don't know, I don't remember it, no one reminds me. There's numerous reasons you give, and you can't do it. You're struggling with it, but it's important. So what you do is you combine with a high probability behavior, which means a behavior that you're likely to do every day. So for example, what I'll do is, if I'm not able to record my sugar every day in the morning, well, I brush every morning. Most of us brush every morning. So what you do is, right before I go for my brushing, and right before I enter the bathroom, I'm going to keep my testing kit where I can see it on the way. And I'm going to take that reading and I pick myself, take that reading quickly, and then go for brushing. What that will do is it will create a strong association between the two. And no matter what, we're not likely to miss brushing. So, with time, you're going to notice that you're also not going to miss that taking your sugar reading in the morning. So, that's the pre-MAC principle essentially. And I think the others is just something that I've spoken about, that just understand how the mind works. Understand, we need to be, I think the element of awareness is very underrated. We need to just establish so much awareness to understand that this is how I do and this is what I do when I'm feeling this way. So for example, this when I'm stressed, I immediately go to the fridge. This is what I've been doing for years. But I wasn't aware of this pattern for years, or I wasn't aware at a very emotional level, or I wasn't aware at the level where I really wanted to bring about change. Now I do. And I know this, I have this pattern in front of me. How do I work upon this? And the last one is basically just make destructive behaviors hard. So I think very interesting when we were having conversations. One of our team members, in fact, Raman. So he would tell us. He was telling me that every time he would come from office and he would just switch on the TV and have a bowl of fries, and it just made it. I hope Raman, it's okay that I'm sharing this here. And he would say that I would just switch on the TV and have my bowl of fries, and I just would lose count that how much I'm eating. And what changed my life was that I stopped watching TV. So what I did was I got someone to hide the remotes or just take off the batteries, and really became very kind of very serious about it. And I started to notice that when I came home and I did not watch TV, there was so much of a reduction in terms of the mindless eating that I would do in front of the television. So it's just that behaviors that you know are going to be, self defeating or self sabotaging, try to make it hard for yourself so that you don't go in for it and it's easily available for you. I think that's I'd like to end the tools and the coping part with that.